Hey Kevin, unfortunately I wasn't able to be here for your celebration, but I wanted to take a few minutes to thank you for your service and wish you the best for your future. You've had a great career at Conoco Phillips. You started out in Ponca City, like I did, and you got to experience the fun of punch cards, terminats, TSO, IMS, DB2, and all those alphabet soup computer tools. We had a lot of fun those days at work, and even more fun playing intramurals after work. You and I got to experience the first personal computers at Conoco and then cell phones when they were rare. I missed out on the Conoco-Phillips merger and separation, but you've been here through a lot of changes. But the best is yet to come.
Howdy, Kevin. Congratulations on your pending retirement after, more than 35 years. Now, I'm really happy for you, but I've noticed how grumpy Vinod and Mike have been this week, so I wonder if there's some correlation with that. I really appreciate all you've done for Conoco Phillips over such a distinguished and lasting career. Yeah, I think it's even more incredible given all the changes that our industry's gone through, as well as all the technology changes that we've both witnessed. For you to have changed with the industry and with the technology and to stay relevant, it's really a great testament to your career. You know, speaking of witnessing, I do feel a little bit of sadness, as there just aren't that many of us left that remember what it was like to punch cards or to troubleshoot JCL or to get all excited about these newfangled 3270 terminals. So it's really incredible that both of us have participated from the effective dawn of business computing, from VMS to COBOL, DEC, from Novell NetWare to Windows, and now in this cloud-centric world, and where there's a machine learning algorithm around and automation around every corner. So I just hope that you're as proud of this journey as I'm proud of the journey that you've been on. I appreciate all that you've done for our company. I tip my cap to you and your long, productive career, and wish you the best in everything. Thanks again, Kevin.
Believe it or not, that's my dad. Yeah, we look kind of alike. He was born, he started here. He went to actually where Western Christian College, it used to be Oklahoma Christian College. And he lived there for 3 years and met my mother. And so I was born here in Bartlesville. So that's my dad. He went to work for Phillips in 1957, and he was in the first IT group for Phillips 66. He was working out in the research center. They gave an aptitude test, and he scored high on it. And the only place in the country to train in COBOL at that time was in Washington, D.C. So he flew to Washington, D.C. for 6 months to learn COBOL, and he was in the first IT group here. So go to the next slide. His experience, you can see, was COBOL Fortran Basic, ImageDB, NPE5, MRJE, CICS, vSAN, Query, MBS, DSLine, KSAM, Protos. A lot of those things I don't know, but you can tell he was into the early, some early mainframes, the UNIVAC, the HP 3000, the Andal. That's what he worked on here at Conoco, Phillips 66. Next slide. And his experience as a programmer, he says, using Fortran, he wrote a refinery component simulation and designed gasoline plant material balance, oil explanation analysis, as well as coding the oil lease royalty payment system. He used assembly language to write and maintain mainframe operating systems, modify compilers and assemblers, and help maintain multi-programming operating systems. So he was here at the very beginning. And go to the next slide, please. I grew up in Bartlesville. When I first started, you know, the mainframe rooms were just giant rooms, clean rooms. You know, just huge rooms, and they had all these tapes, and I actually have a few old tapes from my dad's days. You know, back then, everything was on tape. And, you know, they run these things through, and it was interesting. you would fill out a form request to mount your tape, and it would print on the terminal over there. Then somebody would go walk manually, take it off the shelf, mount it on the tape drive. And back then, they had a high-tech improvement. They gave them skates. So they would skate to go get a tape and put it on. That was one of the high-tech improvements. And then pretty soon they got to where they were on cassettes, and they had them in the cylinder, and the robotic arm would go around pulling out these tapes. So that was high-tech when it was on cassette tapes. Let's go to the next slide. I started out with key punch cards. It's interesting, 80 characters across. You know, just recently, our ABAP code just was changed where you could write past 80 characters. It's funny how one thing from that many years ago still applies today, the 80 character limit on tapes, or on our coding language. So my first job I ever got at Conoco, I took a big deck of cards to the operating room and ran this deck through as their payroll system. And totally changed from that. Next slide. We had to do graphing. Before you wrote a program, you had to graph it out. You had to graph out all the logics, decisions, and everything like that, because you didn't have your own terminal. You had to draw it out, map out your logic, and then go to the next slide. Then you also had to draw out and flowchart your system as well. Your individual programs in your system, and then the next slide. And then you had to write it on a manual coding sheet, manually write out your statements that would then be sent to a key punch to key in. So talk about, that was the first keyboard. We manually wrote those things out, send me key punch and go on the next slide. And then we had the old 80 character terminal, and we shared these things. There was in a room, you didn't have your own terminal, there was a little flag outside. If your terminal opened up, they took the flag out, so you peek out the hallway. Is there a terminal open? And finally, you see a terminal, and you go down there and log in. But you had to share terminals. And I remember when they finally decided we all got our own terminal. That was just like a big deal, getting our own terminal. Next slide. JCL, here's an example of JCL. You had to write all the different things, pull it in the different files. And you didn't do internal sorts in COBOL, it was too expensive. You had to external sort it with a sync sort and then bring it back into your program because memory was so huge. Next slide. COBOL really took off. It's still, believe it or not, one of the largest footprints in the world even now is with COBOL. And because of the time frame, it's funny, because memory is so critical, we only had a 2-digit year and everything. So, to be honest, because of the memory, we basically built SAP because when everybody went to Y2K, they couldn't afford to redo their old COBOL system, so they bought SAP. It's all because of our memory concerns that we just put a 2-digit year in all our files. Next slide. Here's a sample COBOL program, the old divisions, identification, environment, data, working storage, and procedure division. Old stuff. Next stuff. Kind of already talked about that. Go on the next slide. Culture. When I got there was a lot of old timers who used to be operators, and they would say, wasn't that long ago when they were in the refinery in Ponca City, when the whistle blew to let the people out of the refinery, they went over to the mainframe, went boom, turned it off, everybody went home. They actually turned the mainframe off, everybody went home. It'd be kind of nice to do that again, wouldn't it? You had to wear a coat and tie to every meeting, and being a football player, I had a big neck. So I had a lot of these special ties, the pre-top ties, because I couldn't fit hardly any of my shirts, and so I tried different ties, and it was a pain. You had to wear a coat and tie to every meeting, every time to work. And there's smoke in every room, every conference room. It was a different culture, different time. The average age at Conoco when we started was 24 and a half in the IT department. We just totally group of young people coming in. It was a really interesting time. There was a big group, there's intramurals, all kinds of games we played with each other. It was just a really cool time. And back then, you were a hero if you were in IT. People wrote out books and manuals, and when you wrote a program and were able to automate it, they almost gave you hugs. You know, they loved you. Now they say, "Well, why can't you do it like Google? You know, why can't you do it like Excel?" You know, back then we were actually heroes. And the interesting thing, there was thermostats in every office and every conference room. Well, it was called thermostat wars. The guys would always be turning it down, the girls would be always turning it up, turning it down. It was an interesting time. Big deal on the 5-year anniversary, you got your own business card. So when you got your 5-year anniversary, you got an extra week of vacation and your own business card. So that was a huge deal. And next slide. And share one quick story. PCs were just coming out. They developed the first video games. We had a DOS machine in our office, and there's a group of guys that would go in at lunch on Friday afternoon at lunchtime, and we'd play this old video golf game, this old little thing that would barely hit the ball, and it'd go beep, 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 beep. So somebody complained and says, "I hear that beep, beep, beep at lunch every Friday." So finally the director of the department came over and said, "You gotta stop playing video golf on Friday after lunch." He said, "So I'm gonna have to find something else to do too. I can't play with you guys anymore." One thing was cool, we had one password, it changed every 6 months. So the first password vault was a yellow sticky note. You wrote your password on it, stuck it in the wall to your drawer. That was the first password vault. Next slide. A lot of different things, I'll run through this. One of the things I want to mention is Steve Garish. He worked for Conoco for a while and then moved to Phillip 66, and he was kind of a geeky guy back then. And we had MFS, which is the front end to IMS databases, and it built a screen. Well, it was all green and black, you know. Well, somebody said Steve Garish found a way you could put color on those things. So I called Steve Garish up and said, "Steve, how do you put colors on MFS?" And he says, "Oh, there's a little ATTR thing, you can change it to red, green, or even flashing." I said, "Cool." So I developed this nice screen with red and green. I showed it to management, and they said, "Take that off. If we get colors on that screen, everybody's going to want colors. So we're going to go back to green." And they did not like that. Our first voicemails, we'd have a little green pad by the phone, and you'd answer everybody else's phone. That was voicemail. And you'd write the little note, "So-and-so called." That was voicemail back then. Email was a piece of paper with a distribution list. You wrote your name and date on it, you just sent it around the office. That was called email. When we merged with Phillip 66, you know, there's a kind of a culture clash there. And the first meeting I went into was with all the Conoco Phillips people, all in one room. And then we went over to our offices in the PV building, and I was next to this one guy who had a huge office. And it was immaculate. He had this big wooden desk. I'm going, "What's this guy doing here in our group?" And finally, I think it was Janice Bland came up to me and said, "Oh, he's important. Be careful when you talk to this guy." And I said, "Well, who is it?" And they said, "His name's Roland Harrison." And he must be a big deal, because it is huge. Remember that big office you had, Roland? It was huge. It was like you're the manager of the whole company. So for about 2 weeks, I was afraid to say anything around Roland. And finally, I think it brought him to somebody said, "Oh, that's just Roland. He's one of us." And my last story I want to share is about when I went to England. I was doing an upgrade with the merger of Conoco and Phillips. And so, first time in England, you go overnight, you're exhausted, you get over there 24-hour. And I go to bed the first night, and I'm just totally exhausted. And the rooms are smaller in England, the hotel rooms. So I laid my laptop down, and there wasn't much room. I got up in the middle of the night, and I was so tired, and I tripped over my laptop that was on the floor, and I missed the desk that I was feeling for and hit my forehead on it. And I saw stars, just like, Bugs Bunny. And there's a big gash in my forehead, and I'm bleeding like anything. So Warren Mayer is next to me. I stood and knocked on the door. I said, Warren, come help me. I tripped over my laptop and my head's bleeding. I don't know what to do. So he's so sweet. He gets up, he walks into my room, sits on my bed, opens up my laptop case and starts booting it up. I said, what are you doing, Warren? He said, you tripped and hurt your laptop? I said, there was blood running down my head, and he's trying to fix my laptop. So I thought, thank you, Warren. Next